Hello everyone, and welcome back to the ARPA Highlight Series. I am Cameron McLaughlin, the Equity and Engagement Coordinator in the People and Belonging Department, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. The ARPA Highlight Series is here to shine a light on the amazing programs and resources made possible through Athens-Clarke County government's allocation and distribution of ARPA funds. Our goal is to educate and inform our community about the impactful work being done, the lives being changed, and the opportunities being created thanks to this vital funding. In this episode, we're highlighting the ARPA-funded work of Chess and Community. This organization empowers youth by fostering critical thinking, leadership, and personal growth through chess and educational activities. We'll explore how the organization addresses the challenges facing young people, the collaborative efforts with other organizations that amplify its reach, and the positive outcomes they've achieved. We'll also dive into how these partnerships are creating a lasting impact on the broader community. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired by the stories and insights we will be sharing with you. To kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role within the organization?
My name is Lemuel Life LaRoche, also known as Life the Griot. I am the Executive Director of Chess and Community. I'm also a Program Director of Youth Force Innovation Hub in Athens, Georgia, a program of the Boys and Girls School.
Can you tell us a little bit about Chess and Community? How did it start? What are the main goals of the organization?
Okay, so Chess and Community, man, that's a long story. I try to keep it short. Pretty much in the early 2000s, I started doing a lot of work with chess when I was an intern at the Department of Juvenile Justice. And I saw that there was like a revolving doors of kids just constantly cycling through. And I wanted to find a way to put a halt to that in some ways. And I decided to use, for every kid that I had on my caseload when I was a social work intern, I started to just teach them how to play chess, right? One was a challenge because it was like the kids saw chess as something foreign. Like, man, I'm not trying to play this, while others where it was a challenge to get them to actually do something that they felt that they haven't done. So a lot of that was the beginning stages of it. I'm starting to set up chess tournaments and competitions at the Department of Juvenile Justice just to show a lot of the staff there that we need to start thinking differently of how we see these young people. It's not like you're just looking at young people with no potential. They got potential. They got minds. They just need guidance and they need opportunities to express and to show that. So in doing so, it was a thing that every kid was just kind of excited about it. But fast forward later, it became one where these kids would even call me after because I'm interning, but afterwards the kids like, yo, let's play chess, and I would take them to do pizza and do different things. And before we know it, Chess and Community was kind of born. We called it Classic City Nights at first, and I focused primarily on kids, boys that were cycling through the juvenile system. But then I began to expand it, and I said, you know what, we're gonna call it Chess and Community because it was more than just the young boys, the nights. We started teaching young girls, and before you know it, it just started to grow. And then we became a nonprofit in 2012 with the focus of really teaching kids like leadership, like allowing them to allowing them to understand how systems around them work. With them just being cycling through the juvenile system, you have to understand that this is just part of a greater system. And then second was, what are your goals? What are your objectives? What are some things you want to do? How do you want to take yourself to the next level using a game of chess as a way to get them to start thinking ahead, to start planning the same deals and strategies that they use to become successful on a chessboard. We wanted them to become successful in life in those same ideas. So from there, Chess and Community was born. Chess at the library, chess and pizza, taking kids to Stone Mountain. Then it became adding robotics, then debates, and it just kind of grew into where we at now.
What specific programs are funded by ARPA funds? How has the ARPA funds helped improve or strengthen the program?
So initially, it's two things, because when we think about ARPA, we talk about the benefits that we received in two areas. One, we created something called Youth, and this was Youth Organizations United to Help. And this was a collaboration of organizations, Chess and Community, Strong Beautiful Godly Girls, Strong Base Inc., Cultivating Lifetime a Legacy, MOU Radio, Education Matters through Rick Dunn. This was a collaboration of organizations coming together to say, we understand that there's a lot of things happening around youth development. how do we work together? And through one of the first ARPA fundings, we were able to work together and collaborate. And that's why I think the ARPA thing is critical, right? Because if it's one thing where it's just being provided to one organization, when that one organization go down, then it's like, okay, how have we really benefited from this process versus when it's used in a collaborative, or what we like to say, collective impact model, collective impact approach, where multiple organizations are working together for a common theme. And the idea was we all are working with youth. How do we bring these youth together into some type of system in where it's not just one organization operating in their own silo, but multiple organizations working together, and it's a feeder system into something greater, like the Boys and Girls Club, like Youth Force Innovation Hub. So this was ideally kind of the process of us thinking, rather than us, because individually it's difficult to, everybody trying to get insurance, because all these are important components when you're talking about having a nonprofit. It's just not passion alone. You have to have structure. You have to have organizational process. And I think the ARPA process allowed us to think deeper to say, do we have the insurance needed to cover? And if not, how do we work collectively to do so? Do we have our outcome measures in place? And all these things are important when we're talking about, again, any type of government funding, especially ARPA, CDBG, community development block grants. You need outcome measures. You need, funding streams. You need to have additional support, and you need to be clear on what it is that we're doing. So us getting ARPA the first time, it was through that collaboration that was very helpful.
So you talk about collaboration and like some of the difficulties. What methods did you use to connect the community to these programs? Like, how did you ensure that the youth involved in these programs, who needed to be there?
So this is a difficult one, right? Only because there are a lot of organizations that are effective in their own ways. Some are heavily connected on the ground, but lack some of the structures needed to take it to, with the resources. Others are heavy with structure and resources, but lack the communication and the connection on the ground. So I think Chess and Community, we maybe sit somewhere in between, where a lot of the work that I've done in the early stages, not just that we have done in the early stages, it was effective in connecting with a lot of those students on the ground, going into the schools, getting to know those teachers, getting to know those social workers at the school, going before social workers, the meetings and the counselors at schools that have meetings, and doing an introduction about the work and the stuff that we're doing so that they can refer students. The other aspect to that is having free programs at the library, and where we encourage our students to bring their friends, bring their connections, bring different people on. The other part was having collaborations with some of these other organizations. My organization may be effective in doing critical thinking, conflict resolution, problem solving through these lenses. But what if we get a young lady who needs access, or a young brother who needs help in this other area that we don't do? This is where collaborating with other organizations helps to say, okay, we can actually refer that organization to this and that. So getting to know each other, having that collaboration, neighborhood leaders, talking to different people within these communities allow us to, put the word out, recruit, hiring people from the community, I think is also a key benefit. We recently just brought on a program coordinator with Chess and Community who graduated from City Shows, who's from this community, who got connections in this community, who got family in this community, who go to churches in this community, And she got cousins, everybody's related to each other, right? So she got cousins that now know this and she knows. So a lot of that was very helpful in us connecting, because I maybe have been effective in the early, 2015, 16, 17, and 18. But a lot of those students get older and move and graduate. A lot of those first sets of Chester Community kids graduated and have left, and they're in college and they're successful and they're doing this. So you got to constantly get into the schools and get into the community and get into some of the churches and have those important dialogues and collaboration.
So you talked a little bit about like performance measures and outcomes. Like, can you share with our listeners some impacts that you've had on the youth, maybe some success stories or some stories that stand out? So
this is important, right? Because I think performance measures and outcomes are key. Because a lot of times, and I'm speaking directly to a lot of the newer people that's trying to get into the space. Sometimes our passion, we see a need and we're like, man, somebody got to do something. And from the outside looking in, it looks like nothing is happening in this community. Every time a kid gets shot, and then one kid gets shot as a kid too much. Every time there's some kind of violence, then immediately there's a reaction that what's happening, and nothing happened in this community. Nobody's doing nothing. Everybody that's actually doing something is really in there for themselves. Nobody really care. And this is what the common outcomes come based off of that. But when we start talking about outcome measures, when you're getting into the work, what are you actually getting into the work to do? You might say, well, I just want to make sure that we're able to get these kids off the streets. In theory, that sounds good. You're getting off the streets, kids off the streets to do what? How many kids do you want to get off the streets? Right? How do you measure if what you're doing is successful? Because sometimes and I think from the university and from this idea of we can just do one program, get the kid in the program, then we finish the program. We got funding to do the program. Now the kid finished that program. The money dried up. Now we can send the kid to say, well, we did this program and we covered, where we did cover. We said we was going to reach 40 kids. We got 40 kids. Were you impactful? What were some outcomes? Like, how do you measure the success that you have done? And oftentimes when you do that, you have to incorporate the parents, behavioral outcomes. Are we seeing an improvement in the kid's behavior? Is the kid, is there open communication? And sometimes we can't just say, well, he or she got into this program and now they're going to be good kids for the rest of their lives. No, they still have real issues, real problems, real community struggles, real things happening that we can't just say this happened and now. So when you think of the programs that we do with Chess Community, it's not just meeting the kid once a month or not just community. This is long term, 3 days out of a week that you have to meet with these kids from the time they're in middle school all the way to the time that they graduate. So we can actually begin to see some real outcomes. Not just getting a kid in one program and then we say, okay, he good. She learned how to play robots or how to build robots. Now they're engineers and experts. No, it takes time. It takes engagement. I went around my elbow to get to my behind, but I say all of that just to say that we have data of a lot of the students that came through Chess and Community who are now graduated, who are in college, who come back during the summers and now they're leading the programs. They're the ones that are leading the book clubs. They're the ones that are now teaching chess during the summers when they're back from school. Others who's been to the program, who's completed the program, they get scholarships and they go off to college or they go into the military or they go and engage into the workforce. So the success is watching those students now grow. And we like to measure our success based on how many of those students come back and is engaging back in this community, and not even just this community, even whatever the community they're in, are they volunteering? Are they engaging? Are they actually doing something? That's how we like to measure outcomes, and we've been seeing a lot of positives. Understanding also that life happens. Shift happens, right? You go into the school, you go into college, you have real problems, you have real dialogues, you get into relationships, you're trying to manage school, you're trying to do all that. But hopefully those principles that we have instilled in them, it comes through and we start to see it as they come. But if we're just looking at numbers, we have over, 350 kids that's went through our robotics programs. Based on the resources that we've been getting from ARPA and CDBG, we have over 300 some kids that went through the robotics programs. We've had multiple of different debates programs that the kids has come through and have polished. I was just at, side note, I was just at UGA homecoming. And I ran to a young lady who was part of our book clubs. And, she was like, yo, I'm in UGA now. I'm this and this. So it's like small stuff like that. It's like, wow, we're making some impact. We're having impact in areas that we need, but how do we continue to have those impacts?
So we talked about the successes. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are some challenges that come with dealing with government funding or just people and organizations in general. Yeah. Could you highlight on some of those challenges?
Definitely. There's a lot of challenges, and I wish I could just say that everybody that came through Chess and Community is off to college. No, there are still some kids that I have to write. There's still some people I got to send money in on their books. You know what I mean? But even inside, I'm encouraging them read, like for every book you read, I'm going to send you $10, $15. Put it on your books. For every book you read, I'm not just going to send you money because, you know what I mean? So there are those challenges as well. But why? Let's take a step back. The reality is, I wish that we can have everybody just come into the program. In the ideal world, the parent would just drop the kid in the program. The parent can participate in some of the programs. The kids get what he or she needs. And there's a collaboration, there's a connection that's developed with the organization and the parents, and in the ideal world, it happens. But in the real world, what happens when a single parent doesn't have the resources, and the cost of living in the neighborhood is too much, and now she has to move from Athens to adjacent county just where she can find affordable, and in doing so, the connection between that student and Chester community or whatever is lost. And then you're figuring out what happened. Their phone just go off. They just go ghost. Like, what happened to them? And then you find out, 3-4 years later, you see this kid homeless somewhere. You like, yo, what? The parents moved and they kept moving, and now this kid is homeless, and you trying to find other resources to get. So real things happen. And I've seen that happen multiple times where kids leave, and then this kid was on the right track, and now this kid ended up having to go to another county. And mom, if it's difficult to live, mom's having to figure out a way, or the single parent having to figure out a way to manage. And then seeing this kid again in this community, and he done dropped out of school, and it's like, yo, what happened? And it's like, well, life happened. And then it's like, how do we pick up from there? And then, it just becomes a spiraling downwards. So these are real things that happen in the community, and this is why it takes that collaborative mode, that collaborative element, where it's just not an organization that does youth development. Are we connected to an organization that does housing? That when we do run into families who are struggling with housing, how do we kind of pair that up? And then, so that's one aspect. But then when you're talking about with, government and, contracts and all these things require time. And sometimes if you're new to it, you don't understand, how do you develop a logic model? How do you make sure that you're meeting all of the things that you said? And sometimes you may say, yeah, we're going to meet this, but then you run into this kind of emergency where we need to figure out a way to allocate some of the resources from here to this family that is in real crisis at the moment. But you can't, how do you bill for that in some ways, right? Because you have to kind of stay on point with your logic model. So a lot of times we're talking what they call top down or grass top and grassroots. We're talking to people that's on the ground that see a need, that try to address and help the need, and then those people that are on top, more with the local governments that have restrictions and rules, and they have to abide by priorities and guidelines that the federal government then laid. So imagine trying to get two of those entities together to agree on something, and then sometimes it gets difficult, but having a supportive office where, like Alejandra, some of the work, like she was very helpful in really sitting down and talking, and yourself and sitting down and talking and says, okay, let's think through this. This is where you can find ways to give some type of grace just to make sure that organizations are meeting the needs and they have all their paperwork and things together. But there's another side to this. Insurance is going up. Insurance costs. Where do you bill for that insurance cost? If the insurance costs about $8,000 a year, because of these are the requirements that the local government or the federal government is asking for, like $2 million insurance, umbrella insurance, and you're like, man, how we going? We trying to figure out money to, run for programming. So you got to figure out another additional $8,000 or $5,000 to $8,000, and you got to figure out where you're going to get that money from just to meet the requirements that are needed, right? Mm-hmm. So there's layers, and it requires clear communication, and it requires really being able to have your SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats, having your board, having a designated person within your organization that's able to just kind of communicate back and forth and make sure that everybody's in compliance. And sometimes we still run into issues, right? But for the most part, communications are ways to address that. And even with other organizations, sometimes you work with all other organizations and you mean well. Everybody's trying to get to the same outcome in reaching the kids. But sometimes you may have different approaches. Sometimes it may be like, well, you trying to take this from me, and you small stuff that it's like, yo, we arguing over pennies, man. Like, here's the structure. It is, and you got your books right. They don't have their books right. And this is just, the process. Who's going to file the taxes? If you're doing collaborative work, is going under whose taxes? Who has to cover that? So it's a lot of those things that are required. That's important when organizations begin to work together. But most important, when there's support from when, let's say, the ARPA funding is available and the local government provides support, and where if you need to understand how to do this, you can actually set up meetings for that. And when we don't take advantage of it, but then the deadline is met and you're like, man, I need to now meet this deadline. And then it's like, I need some grace. And it's like, well, you've had support. Then it's like, oh, local government, y'all be trash. Y'all don't. And it's like, come on, man. Like, we all got to do our part. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So you mentioned communication as one, key.
Vital.
And feedback is some sort of communication. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about how Chesson community uses feedback from stakeholders, from local government, from actually the participants in the program. How does Chesson community use that feedback to enhance initiatives or move the program further?
Now, that's a really good question, because the feedback loop is vital. Right? We might feel like, okay, this is critical, this is interesting, this is important. But then you talk to kids, they be like, I just don't see the purpose of it. Like, this was boring. It didn't really, I don't even know why we did it. It doesn't make no sense. So it's like, man, let me figure out a way to, restructure this program. And those feedback loops are critical. So it's two layers to it. One is we always have to measure what we're doing to see if it's success. So we have an evaluator that we put on the ARPA, on a contractor. And the evaluator helps to evaluate what we're doing. So for every program we do, what are our goals? We are focused on critical thinking, conflict resolution, problem solving. All right. So we develop all these programs around those three elements that we're measuring. We want to measure a kid's critical thinking ability, how the kids resolve conflict, and how they solve problems and work in these groups. So feedback loops, pre and post tests, evaluation, so we can know, okay, are we meeting the point there? So that's one from that, so that we can satisfy grants, and so we can say, okay, we're all looking, we're measuring, we're testing something. On the other aspect, sometimes in doing so, the kids might feel like, oh man, this is boring. I got to do another one, another pre and post. But those feedback loops are critical for us to know what programs we need to cut the following year, or what programs we need to add based on where we see the needs are. So having that communication from the kids, from the parents, we always trying to find, sometimes we're not too successful at it, but we always create that element in where we are getting those kind of feedbacks from parents and kids. Now, community stakeholders, other people can see you and be like, man, you're doing it. You're making it happen. You're doing good work. You trying to figure out how to keep the lights on, right? While other people may see you like, well, I would do this differently, right? Because you always got the Monday morning quarterback action going on. Like, I would do this. I would be doing this. And it's like, well, do it. If it's that easy, do it, right? But getting those feedback from other organizations that talk about, okay, this is what I feel you need to start looking at. Like, oh, I didn't even consider that. Let me actually find ways to implement that. But for importance of programming and direction, where are you going with Chesson community in years, within the next year or two? What's your 5-year goals, and how do you shift and adjust some of that based on some of those feedbacks and loops that you're getting?
So I've heard a lot about how collaboration with other organizations has been vital to what Chesson community does. Is there any more that you can maybe detail or highlight about the importance of collaborating with other organizations?
I mean, it's critical, because you don't have all the answers, like, period. And sometimes and this is unfortunately, and I think being a winner podcast, I think it's important to talk about this. There is a wisdom, or there is a mindset that, okay, you ain't even from Athens, so you don't really care about this community. I got kids, you got kids, and you've been given, you don't really care, you don't really know. We know it. I know the community better than you, and this and this. So it's like, okay, well, come on in and help me see where you can see it further, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than I want to create something to compete. And it's like, even if you do, come on, create it. Even if we was to compete, who wins? The community wins. If we get more programs out here and the community's winning and the kids are involved in it, the community wins. So if your motivation is to compete, then you can compete so that we can make the community win. Yeah. But the most important thing is to really move away from that competitive mindset. Like, what are we competing for? Like, we're competing for what? And at the bottom of it, it's like sometimes we're competing because I want the dollars that you're getting, or you getting more money than I do, or and it's like, okay, I get it. So this is where collaboration is important, and we need to continue to talk and figure out how do we strengthen those newer organizations that are coming up to get access to resources and to share what we know, so that they don't make the mistakes that we've made, and so that they can be effective. But it also requires somebody to listen and not look at it as, I'm trying to outdo you. I'm trying to, I am trying to raise that next youth. I'm not in the nonprofit business to, I'm here just so I can be over a nonprofit. This is work. This is time away from your family. This is commitments. This is sacrificing your Saturdays, sometimes your Sundays. This is work 7 days a week. I don't want to work 7 days a week. I have children. I have family. I have things that I need to do. I have personal goals that I want to reach. And sometimes this is a lot of work. So when an organization come and be like, oh, I want to compete, it's like, you ain't got to compete. We can work together. You want the keys? Here's the keys. If you really want it, like, you can have it. It's a lot of work, but it's being open enough to want to work together and being open enough to allow them to see that this is real work and it requires collaboration to get this to be effective. I may be reaching kids this age to this age. If you're reaching kids this age to that age, then I can be a feeder to your program, or your program could be a feeder to my program. Like, this is where collaborative work is important. If I'm working with students, but we see that there's a parent that needs something, and this organization work with incarcerated youth or parents who's this, then I want to refer kids to you, not compete with you, but work with you so that we can have a better impact on this community.
Let's talk about the future of chess and community.
Yes, sir.
How do you plan to build on some of the successes that you had? What are some new initiatives that you're excited about?
So first of all, the world is changing. One thing that we've started piloting some things 2 years ago in 2022 is to really bring in a lot of the artificial intelligence into the process. And we've been making some innovations, especially in a lot of the coding and the robotics. And that has been able to get our organization really on the front line through different tech agencies, we looking at coming to some of the conferences. And even this year, we're going to have our 12th annual conference, actually 2025, 12th annual conference, March 29th. You can ask people, have y'all been to one? We've been doing this for 12 years. Now, it's not because the word has been around. We've been on billboards in all kinds of communities to advertise it. People come to what they're interested in, and I get it. But don't rob yourself of the opportunities to get the experience, to get your kids to get an experience that can potentially project them to the next level. Right now, there's a demand for young people to really understand how artificial intelligence, large language models, machine learning, how a lot of that work. And some of the spaces that we've been getting into more is trying to get our kids and the new kids to understand what's coming down the pipeline with artificial intelligence and how we can be ahead of the curve and not to be the victims or of a lot of the new stuff that is created that is used against us, right? So being ahead of the curve. So looking forward, like chess and community, man, we're really looking globally, and Our branches is growing in Atlanta, is growing in Macon, is growing in other places, and where we're still using the kids competing with each other in chess and robotics and debates and other things. And we're looking to continue to grow that. But the biggest focus is, where we see the adjunct of that artificial intelligence coming in. And moreover, 2026, World Cup is coming. What are we doing? How are we trying to position ourselves? So these are real important dialogues that we're having. And I'm challenging everybody that's listening to it to start thinking beyond just where you're at. Think big. There's nothing you can't do right now, especially with access to artificial intelligence and how that can help to boost what you're doing with your organization. Don't just look at local funding. Start looking globally. The world's getting smaller. Start making collaborations and connections all around the world, right? Not just in one area. So I'm thinking big, while at the same time, I'm also recognizing the need to meet the kids where they're at here.
Recently, you all received some ARPA funding. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that. What are some plans with the new allotted amount of money from ARPA? Because ARPA is running out. This is probably the last that organizations, the American Commission voted last week to divvy out the rest of the money. So there's no more ARPA after this. A lot of organizations, people think that it's until 2026, yeah. But no, all the money has been allocated and there's no more ARPA. So let's talk about the current plans with the ARPA funding. What happens once ARPA funds are used up, as far as, I know you mentioned a little bit about global funding and things like that. Funding is important to ensure that these programs keep going. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So a couple of layers to it. I think the first layer is that when looking at what we plan to do with it, we develop something called Project Rewire, and that's something that the ARPA is, helping to fund. And this focuses on a lot of robotics. This focus on the debates. This focus on a lot of critical thinking, a lot of the civic engagement. Learning about local politics and politics in general. So this funds that initiative, our Project Rewire initiative. Project Rewire's initiative is something that we've been doing for the last couple of years. Now, we're also looking to work a lot closer with, I like the idea of, what we talk about, collective impact, really merging some of the stuff that we're doing in collaboration, stronger collaboration with the Boys and Girls Club, so that way, collectively, we can all apply for bigger resources outside of just ARPA, right? We're also looking into a much stronger, I just put a grant writer, on contract that is helping to identify where some of those additional resources can be coming from. Now, the landscape for grants is a lot more competitive, right? But so sometimes you don't have the ability to see all the way through because that's not what you do, right? But having a grant writer on contract that's actually able to look deeper, coordinate with them and start looking at other resources, get a lot more robust with our fundraising, initiatives, corporate partnerships, CSRs, corporate social responsibilities, right? Start looking at, but putting together a stronger team that we can really go after the resources a lot stronger, that allows us to be able to continue to function even outside of ARPA. As always, you try not to put everything in one basket. Our conferences, that's one of the ways that we do fundraising, and we get corporate sponsorships and corporate support through those funding through our conference. So looking to really be a lot more robust in those areas, looking to engage a lot deeper and find resources outside of just Athens to fund the programs that we have here, looking for stronger collaborations with the universities or with a department within the university that's able to write grants and maybe bake your organization into that, right? So I'm speaking in general of how other people need to start thinking about it. But personally, these are some of the lines that we're using. We recognize that ARPA is one, so we're looking at major ways of fundraising and doing exciting events. We started something called Chessathon. We did that. That's going on for 2 years. We're going to make that stronger. And that would be a way of having Athens as a local attraction for chess. that can bring business and different companies and tourism. And if you're able to help with that can potentially help to, raise funds in other areas. So we're constantly thinking of other ways to make that impact.
What advice would you give to other organizations interested in applying for funding through Athens-Clarke County government?
It's one, maybe start with a logic model. Start to really understand what it is you want. Don't look at it as that funding that you get is going to be the end and all, right? Because sometimes it's like, well, I got funding, this is going to pay for everything. No, they're only paying for one small thing. And a lot of times what you put on your scopes of service is what you have to accomplish, right? So if you're saying on the scope of service, this is what I'm going to do, we're going to address this, we're going to do this, we're going to use this for that and this, but then you decide that, okay, midway you want to shift it to something different, it can be a little difficult. And sometimes if what you spend money on is not reimbursed because it wasn't in your scope of service, you got to eat that, right? And you can't just start, being angry. You can, but what you put on paper is what you're going to have to follow through, right? So I would encourage organizations is to have a clear logic model, have clear objectives of what it is you want to do. Put your team together, create an internal checks and balance system. Take advantage of those opportunities that local government use for you to communicate with different people that have already done that. They give you additional support. Utilize them. Right. And then it becomes easier. So that way you don't get caught not knowing, or you miss a deadline, or you this, and then you want everybody to make, reservations for you, or to, create some kind of leeway for you to miss a deadline. So it's real. It's and a lot of the stuff I'm sharing are things that I'm also constantly having to practice. When you have organizations, make sure that everybody's on point, that everybody is doing what they need to do, and people are constantly move, and people have other jobs. And so it can get very heavy in a lot of ways. But I would just encourage people to have a clear logic model and take full advantage of opportunities that are provided for you to, get the support that you needed from local government, to look over your logic model, look over your application, invite other organizations that may have had to do it to show you have you, look at this. We may help you to see something you didn't see. So work with other organizations that have done it before. Most important, use the resources that the local government provides. And then the other thing is having clear objectives and goals, making sure that your team is talking about it and you know what to do, whether you get the money or you don't. And even after you get the money, how you have a clear financial system in place to manage.
Is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know about Chestnut Community and the impact of ARPA funding?
Well, it's collaborative efforts. I might have a big vision, big ideas, like, I want to do this. And Chestnut Community, we're doing a lot, and we're going to be seeing a lot more. I mean, there's going to be a conference coming up that's going to be next level. Like, I'm telling y'all, like, if y'all can't come on out, this is going to be what we hope life-changing opportunities. So be a part, come see, be a part. And this is most important. You don't have to know how to play chess to be part of Chestnut Community. Because everybody keeps saying, well, I don't play chess, so I don't know. Chess is just one element of what we do. But as far as with Chestnut Community and ARPA, it's like, just it's appreciation of having the fuel. I could say I'm a bus, and ARPA provides the gas that helps me to move this bus from one place to another, that helps me to, to purchase the things that we need to run some of these programs. So, just there's an appreciation there, but also, look, let's just continue to work on it. Even if you have a plan, execute, think about it. If it don't get, I've been doing Chestnut Community for 10 years before it became Chestnut Community, right? With no funding, So just know that these things takes time, and don't give up on whatever it is that you want to do. But Chestnut Community, we're here to support, we're here to help, and we try to do our part. So in closing, how can people get involved, and how can people show up and support for Chestnut Community? Just, come. You find me more at Youth Force. I'm there. We're doing a lot of collaborative work there. So come to Youth Force. We have programs every Tuesday. Sometimes some Saturdays we have programs. And that we open up the door for people to come. And whether you're a robotics, whatever you do, you photographer, videographer, we need all of that. Come see us at Youth Force. We're there most of the days, and just, check our website, and you can always be volunteers. And if you want to be a partner in some ways, just, reach out and let us know. You can reach out at info@chessandcommunity.org, info@chessandcommunity.org.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the ARPA Highlight Series. We hope you've gained valuable insight into the impactful work Chess and Community is doing to empower youth through critical thinking, leadership, and personal growth. You've learned about the organization's influence on the lives of young people and met the dedicated individuals driving positive change in our community. A special thanks to Life and the entire Chess and Community team for their hard work and commitment to shaping the next generation of leaders. Be sure to tune in to future episodes as we continue to highlight the transformative projects and resources benefiting Athens-Clarke County. Until next time, take care and stay informed.